bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swagadam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shimhati Kadamba Kanana Swami Tinamini Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shimhati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Sitarini Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so we're looking today at the ninth canto of the Bhagavatam, the 19th chapter entitled King Yayati Achieves Liberation. And today we're looking at a few verses, text number 21 to 24. So I see we have verse 20 on here, so I can chant the Sanskrit and we can read the translation, the word for word in translation, and then I'll just read the rest of the verses, just read the English. Ityuktva nahusho jayam tadiyam puravevaya datva swajarasam tasmat adade vigatas priyam. Sukadeva Goswami said, after speaking in this way to his wife, Devayani, King Yayati, who is now free from all material desires, called his younger son Puru and returned Puru's youth in exchange for his old age. Text 22. King Yayati gave the southeast to his son Druhu, the south to his son Yadu, the west to his son Turvasu, and the north to his son Anu. In this way he divided the kingdom. Yayati enthroned his younger son Puru as the emperor of the entire world and the proprietor of all its riches, and he placed all the other sons who were older than Puru under Puru's control. Having enjoyed sense gratification for many, many years, O King Parikshit, Yayati was accustomed to it, but he gave it up entirely in a moment, just as a bird flies away from the nest as soon as its wings have grown. That Maharaj Yayati was immediately liberated from the bondage of conditioned life is certainly astonishing, but the example given herewith is appropriate. A tiny baby bird, dependent fully on its father and mother even to eat, suddenly flies away from the nest when its wings have grown. Similarly, if one fully surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is immediately liberated from the bondage of conditioned life. As promised by the Lord himself, as Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Moksha Yishyami. As stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Kirata Hunandra Pulinda Pulkasha, Abira Shumpa Yavana Kasadaya, Enyecha Papa Yudapashraya Shraya, Shutyanti Tasmai Prabhavishnave Nama. Kirata, Huna, Andra, Pulina, Pulkasha, Abira, Shumba, Yavana, the Kasha races, and even others addicted to sinful acts can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord, for he is the supreme power. I beg to offer my respectful obeisances unto him. But Vishnu is so powerful that he can deliver anyone at once if he is pleased to do so. And Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, can be pleased immediately if we accept his order by surrendering unto him, as Maharaj Yayati did. Maharaj Yayati was eager to serve Vasudeva Krishna, and therefore, as soon as he wanted to renounce material life, Lord Vasudeva helped him. We must therefore be very sincere in surrendering ourselves unto the lotus feet of the Lord. Then we can immediately be liberated from all the bondage of conditioned life. And this is clearly expressed in the next verse. So for those of you who are following the story thus far, the story of Maharaj Yayati is a very famous story. And Maharaj Yayati, one of his sons was Yadu, who was one of the ancestors of Krishna. So therefore, we sometimes hear Krishna being explained to be from the Yadu dynasty. So in this way, Yayati is very prominent individual, but his story is also important in and of itself. So we know that Maharaj Yayati was a great king, and he had his life had become very complicated due to his pursuit of material opulence, material wealth, specifically in the form of getting entangled with Devayani, the daughter of Shukracharya. And then once when he ended up marrying her, and then when he got involved with Sharmishta, who was Devayani's maidservant. She was very angry. She went to complain to her father. Her father cursed Maharashi that he would become old, prematurely old. But then when Shukracharya realized that this curse would also negatively influence his own daughter, who was now suddenly married to an old man, then he gave Devayati the opportunity to say that you can exchange your old age for someone else's youth. So then Maharashi Yati, he was asking his sons, and all his sons, they said no, they're not willing to make that exchange, even for their father, except the younger son, Puru. And Puru immediately embraced it. You see, he explained that the debt you owe to your father is basically you're unable to pay that debt. The debt you owe to your parents is immense. So he was immediately willing to embrace it, and he accepted his father's old age. And his father was then young again, and then he again continued for a very, very long time to pursue the pleasures of youth. But then even then at the end, he realized that these pleasures will never be satisfied by simply indulging them, and that is the nature that's explained to be like a fire. The desires of youth, which is the desires that everyone has, desires to eat well, have lots of sex, have lots of money, have beauty and power, all these various things, the opulences or the pleasures that are given by the material world. These things are all naturally fleeting. So they are temporary, but also they cannot really satisfy. Even though we need some of it to stay sane and happy, you will never actually satisfy it by indulging it, just like a fire. By putting fuel into a fire, you will never satisfy the fire. The fire will just continue to blaze. But then at the end, Maharashi Yati, it was explained, even though he was going through all these various trials and having, to one sense, being absorbed to a large part in fleeting material pleasure, at the same time, he was always consistently worshipping Krishna during all this. And therefore, we see at the end, his worship of Krishna matured. And at the end, he actually, was able to distance himself from pursuit of temporary pleasure and fully devote himself to self-realization. But it didn't happen. And here, apparently, here we see at this point, he's now made that conviction. He's like, okay, I'm done pursuing fleeting pleasure. Now I will devote all my attention to self-realization. And it looks like it happened instantaneously, but it doesn't happen instantaneously. Apparently in this moment, this is the moment where he makes this transition to dedicate his full energy towards self-realization. But it was actually a maturation process to consistently worshiping Krishna throughout the various phases of his life. Whatever else he was doing, whatever else was absorbing his attention, still a certain amount of his time and attention was reserved for his worship of the Lord. And therefore, that matured at the end in a realized knowledge. So that then is the position we can see of the impure devotee. So oftentimes, if we read Srila Prabhupada's literature, or we read the Bhavatam, so many times reference is made to the pure devotee. So, and that is our goal, and to become pure devotees. And we hear about the pure devotee and how the pure devotee is fully focused on Krishna's pleasure, and the pure devotee wastes no time, and the pure devotee is not interested in any short-term material pleasure. The pure devotee is only interested in Krishna's pleasure. So that's very wonderful. But then there's also the impure devotee, the other side of the coin, which is most likelihood, I don't mean to offend anyone here, but there's a high likelihood that most of us fall into that category, where we are devotees, but we are not exclusively devotees. We are also other things mixed into it. So other priorities and experiences and desires, one can say, are also mixed into our being. And therefore we are devotees, but not exclusively. Other things also that are mixed in. And that is our position, the impure devotees. And Maharishi Yati's story, in one sense, is the story of the impure devotee, a person who had faith in Krishna and was sincerely devoted to Krishna and worshipped Krishna throughout his entire life, but still on the side pursued other things as well. And we see how it happened, how his life developed. And it is interesting because the life of the impure devotee, call it that, the practicing devotee, is perhaps a more generous way to term it, a more positive way, because it is very positive. To be a devotee in any sense is something very wonderful and very rare, even if one is not completely pure yet. So the practicing devotee, someone who is trying to practice pure devotional service, it is an interesting state of life that we enter into, because to become a devotee means we accept high spiritual ideals and values as our goal in life. We accept that this is it. I want to become a pure devotee. I want to become fully purified and abandon all lust, anger, greed, envy, madness, and illusion. This is what I commit to now in my life. So, but when we embrace that, those ideals, in the beginning it's very wonderful when we first hear about it. And that's the greatness of the Bhagavatam, the greatness of this culture and this Krishna consciousness movement, is that it's people who are at least saying what the real thing is. That this is the goal. This is where we want to go. And for some people, it turns them off. It sounds way too serious and way too intense. But for some of us, most of us who are here, we somehow become inspired by this vision, this high ideal. We're like, yes, that makes sense. That does make sense. That should be the goal of life. Why should the goal of life be anything less? Why settle for something less? But then, once we embrace these values, embrace these ideals, then we immediately enter into a state of what one can call a contradictory state, a state in which we have our ideals and then we have our practical reality, and these two things, they don't really line up, and it is quite uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable to have high ideals, because there's then a tension that exists between our ideals and our practice. And all of us, we experience it every single day, where we know that what is the best thing for us to do with our time, but still we sometimes can't help ourselves and we waste our time. So it's relatively innocent sometimes, scrolling around and wasting time with so many useless things, to be honest about it, specifically in the modern world. Think about how much time we would waste on our computer screens, looking at things that are completely irrelevant to our lives. And that it really doesn't actually line up with our values. So that also sometimes we have habits that are way worse. I know I have a devotee friend who has a little bit of a cocaine problem. What can he do? He has entered into the path of Krishna consciousness and he embraces these ideals, but at the same time he has some addictions that he carries over from his previous life. And these things, one is not able to shake them off very easily. So when we enter onto the path when we become a practicing devotee, we enter into a state of tension, some tension that exists between our ideals. And this tension has to be properly managed. So when immaturely managed, the tension that happens for those seeking high ideals can cause a lot of guilt and shame can happen. And if we look, for example, at the history of Christianity or other forms of religion, at least in the modern world, can be characterized. People often say they abandoned their religion because it just led to feelings of guilt and shame, which is not really positive experience. And if we look at modern psychology, a large part of what happens in modern psychology, or the easy way to do it, is that people try to convince themselves to become okay with living a substandard life, become okay with whatever you are, just whoever you are, whatever your ideals or whatever your desires are. It's just fine, just go for it, just pursue it, and understand that the guilt and the shame that you feel sometimes in your life is just due to the residue of your religious conditioning. But actually, these religious ideals they're not really accurate. No one really lives like that. No one can really do that. So why beat yourself up about it? Just abandon these things, and then you will feel much more at peace and ease with yourself, and you will just be okay with who you are. You can embrace yourself completely, and embrace basically what it means is embrace all your desires, all the various things that you feel that you are addicted to and that you want to do and that you can't give up. You just embrace all these things. So that is a very short-term solution. It will give some immediate effect if one does that. If you abandon your high ideals, then you can initially experience great relief. Great relief. A great relief can be experienced where you're like, all that pressure disappears, and you just feel such a relief. And you're like, oh my God, I should have done this a long time ago. And then we feel that now all my problems are solved. So much problems came just because I was trying to live up to these impossible ideals. And now I'm just at peace with myself. But the reality is this usually a very short-lived experience, because we have also lost something very valuable when we abandon our spiritual ideals, abandon our vows, abandon our dedication towards the execution of Krishna's desire and the desires of our spiritual teachers. Then we lose something very valuable, and that what you lost, you will perhaps takes you a little while before you realize what you have lost. But you lose the thing that ultimately grounds your life and gives you some sense of purpose and direction. And ultimately, even though these ideals can sometimes make us have contradictory feelings about ourselves, this is also the root of self-respect and dignity. As we invest in our highest ideals, that's how we develop a sense of dignity and a sense of self and confidence that is wholesome and based on something real. When we start to see that, yes, I'm really investing in my ultimate welfare, and your whole life becomes meaningful as it slowly becomes arranged around these spiritual ideals. So abandoning our spiritual ideals, it doesn't actually lead in the long term to disappearance of guilt and shame, but actually will in the long term degrade us, because the moment that we cut off our connection to these higher ideals, you have no ability to really control yourself. The root cause of control is having some ideal, and then as you strive for this ideal, you slowly pull yourself up to higher levels of existence, and you're able to release more of the junk, the junky desires that keeps us tethered to so many things that just waste our time and actually waste our health. So when we cut that connection off, then we're just again thrown back onto ourselves. And how will you protect yourself from desires? Desires come and then they grab us and they pull us back into the muck. And then if you look, for example, at modern society, you'll see that when people abandon religious values, and you just see this slow degradation of society, where each generation has to lower the bar more and more and more so that people can still feel good about themselves. And up to the point where we are today, where basically the things that people do today, even 100 years ago, if you do that, you would be completely ostracized out of society. But now in the moment, you can just do basically whatever you want. I mean, there's certain things that we still have, like you can't harass people or sexual abuse. There's still some limits we have, but within it, people can do the craziest things, and not consider that they have to at all change their ways. So we see that is gradually going down. and it will continue to go down. It's interesting. You can see on the internet a big debate about removing the age of consent, saying how basically people, to a certain extent, wanting to normalize pedophilia, saying that it's okay, it's not a problem. You can read up about actually many well-known philosophers, even in the Western tradition, including Sartre and some French existentialists. They were all in favor of that. So we see that just this gradual reduction of any kind of values or norms comes when one gives up that ultimate spiritual ideal. So one loses something great, and to actually lead to further degradation of the soul. The real thing, how then to deal with this reality, to this conflict that comes when we commit to high ideals? Are we supposed to always feel horrible that we're not living up to our ideals? No, that excessive sense of guilt or shame that we feel, the root cause of that is not actually our ideals. The root cause of that is our excessive pride. It's due to our intense pride, due to our intense sense of self-importance, that we struggle to live with our own failures and our own difficulties. That's what makes it so painful. It's not really that painful. Why is it so shocking that we will sometimes fail? Why is it such a problem? Why is it a problem that sometimes we can't live up to our high ideals, that it will take some time for us to improve, and that at the moment we're not really where we want to be? Why does it disturb us so much? It disturbs us because we have such an inflated sense of self-importance, such an intense sense of that somehow I'm supposed to be perfect, and if I'm not perfect, it's so painful. But that is just intense pride. That is just an intense sense of pride that we harbor within ourselves, and that we think that we basically want to be perfect, and that anything that reveals our imperfections is like intensely painful for us. And but you can see it in the modern world, because it's the modern world, it's the age of the individual, which each individual seeks to be worshipped. If you look up like how social media basically exploits the desire of people to basically be worshipped. You create the altar of yourself, where you post all these pictures of yourself doing all these beautiful, wonderful things, and you make your life look much better than it actually is. And then why do you do it? Because you seek other people's adoration and other people's worship as they worship you, by liking your posts and following you, becoming your disciples. It's just this perverted creation where we basically exploit that desire of all of us to become God, to become worshipped. But who are we to be worshipped? It's completely ridiculous. So if one abandons pride, then actually our high ideals is just a great sense of consolation. And that when we are unable to successfully live up to it, we don't become disturbed by it. Because we realize, what's the problem? I should just be patient. Let me just patiently execute, patiently stay dedicated to my high ideals and invest in it as much as I can. And I will get there at some point. Why am I so disturbed? So, and ultimately the only way really to overcome pride is by encountering our own limitations. Humility cannot be a theoretical thing. We cannot theoretically try to explain to ourselves how we are supposed to be humble, how we are not perfect. Humility is experienced when we practically encounter our limitations. So when we live up to high ideals, in the pursuit of those high ideals, we see our limitations. Then it is easy for us, much more easy for us to be humble. If you're not really encountering your limitations, when you are lazy, then you'll see it's also very easy to be proud, because then we think that we can do it. I had this friend in school who he never studied at all. He never studied for exams or anything, and he would get quite a decent grade. He got maybe a C, a C, even though he didn't study. And he was so proud of his C, of the fact that he can get a C without studying. And he was just completely thinks that he's actually a genius because, I got a C and I didn't even study. And if you would press him, he would tell you, because in his mind, it meant that, if I would study, I would get an A+, no problem. So in his mind, he was a genius and he was very proud of himself. But is that really true? He doesn't even know. He doesn't even know if he would, but he consoled himself. Yes, if I tried, I would do like that. But it's only when you really pursue something and if you really study hard, and you really do your best, and then you get an A or you get an A minus, then you realize, well, actually, that's what I am. This is my limit. This is as good as I can do. And then you become humble when you realize that you have your limitations. And whatever your limitations are, however far you can reach up in anything, there's always someone who will be better. So it's not like that you're better or worse that makes you, it's not that when you're worse than other people, you become humble, or if you're better than other people, you become proud. No, it's when you encounter your limitations, wherever they are in the scale of things, then you are like, yeah, actually, I can see practically that I'm limited. This is what I am. This is how far I can go. So that is how we reduce pride, by striving for high ideals, and encountering our limitations and having to be patient. And in the pursuit of devotional service, we see that it will take a long time for devotional service to mature. So therefore, Rupa Goswami also explained that patience is one of the main ingredients. Patience, confidence, and enthusiasm all has to be combined in this pursuit. And we stay consistently humble by consistently experiencing, seeing where our limitations are. But as you said, our limitations, it has to be combined with sincere effort, with really making a sincere effort at doing what we can. And that's what we see in Maharaj Yati's life. So even though he was a king, so kings, the Bhavatam always takes very extreme examples to show us certain things. So kings live like how people on Instagram want to live, or want to make their life look. They have intense amounts of money, intense amounts of power, intense amounts of sex. Like we can see, Yati had so many wives, and the kings in those ages also, they would have so many concubines, because the reality with kings is that at the age in which kings fought their own wars, their sons will die. Many in war, many sons die. So the princes would always be dying. So kings were just having as much children as they can possibly can, because the reality of the likelihood of your kids dying in war is very high. So they would have hundreds, you can, even in history, like recent history, you hear about kings who have like 700 concubines, whatever. So much sex, so much wealth, so much power, so much fame. And the king is worshipped. You think that we worship celebrities, you should imagine how much a king is worshipped in a pre-democratic age. Now we have ceremonial kings who basically just like little show puppies that walk around like the King of England, but they're just like basically public relationship stunts. But imagine an age in which that person has absolute control over what's happening in the country. People worship someone like that. So we see that Maharaj Yati, even though he had all these intense opulences, he still consistently performed his worship of Krishna. Amidst all that, amidst whatever else is happening, he consistently performed his worship. So that's really how the patience that we require. So wherever we are in our life, wherever our limitations are, if within those limitations we consistently worship Krishna, then at a certain point this worship will mature. And it specifically happens, for most of us, it will happen when you become older. Because when you become older, everything gets taken away. Your beauty, your youth, so many things get taken away. Your ability to even eat nice foods. You see old people, when you become really old, you can't even, you have to be careful what you eat. You eat something a little too, you think now you're young, oh, I struggle with my diet because I struggle to give up all these fatty foods that I like to eat. Yeah, but just wait until one day when you can't digest it anymore. And then you see how easy it is to not eat it. If you eat it, then you basically become sick for 2 days. So old age is this thing that sort of slowly takes everything away. But for the devotee, it's great. For the devotee, time is our greatest friend, because time will naturally push us forward in life. And time will slowly take things away that we cannot necessarily voluntarily take away. And that also has to be understood. There can also be a premature approach to spiritual life can lead to greater damage. We saw that once when Srila Prabhupada, he had a servant, so someone who was personally traveling with him, a young man, his name was Shrutikirti. And Shrutikirti got it into his head that, he has to simplify his diet. So he got onto this heavy fasting, where he would fast a lot of time and eat just very little, because he thought that, this is the goal of life, is to abandon material pleasure. So I'm just, now it's done. I'm just gonna, abandon this, gonna fast and eat very simple. So then one day, Prophet saw that he's not eating, and he said, he says, why are you not eating? He says, no, Prophet, I'm fasting. Prophet says, you are a young man. He says, just eat, just eat. You're a young man. What is your problem? There's no need for you to fast. He says, later when you get old, he says, these things will come automatically. You don't have to do it prematurely. It's like, now you're a young man, use your energy, rather eat and have energy and use it to do something valuable, than prematurely try to abandon something. Just use your energy. Like, for example, if you are beautiful, use your beauty, use it. Beauty is a powerful thing. You can use beauty in so many wonderful ways. If you're on Instagram and you're beautiful, you're going to get a lot of likes just because you're beautiful. And then if you share stuff about Krishna, then your beauty becomes engaged in Krishna service. So why would you now prematurely think, okay, well, I have to abandon this beauty, it's temporary. It's not really going to last. So I'm just going to stop being beautiful, shave off all my hair. And then, this is how I will make advances in spiritual life. So that's also not really what is encouraged. What is encouraged is whatever opulences you have, be used in Krishna's service. And then naturally, with time, as time goes by, as we use these things, when we have them, and when these things then start being taken away by the force of time, which is inevitable, we won't be disturbed by it. But we will be ready then to, when it goes on, we move on. And then the energy that is freed up can then be used, and our attention can be focused on Krishna. So that's how spiritual life really works. And we see Maharishi Yati's life, a very successful life. Even though he encountered all these difficulties, so many temptations, and he was so much involved in the world, but because of his consistent worship of Krishna and he's using it, he was also a very good king. That has to be understood. He really was a wonderful king and doing wonderful work as a king, and really made the best of it. So then when the time comes that he had to take that next step and mature, then his life was pretty successful. So what's this last thing I wrote here? So yes, very interesting. The life of the practicing devotee. So some of the themes we touched on, the principle of high ideals, that even though high ideals can cause us some stress and tension, do not abandon these high ideals, because they are actually our greatest jewels. And at the end, they allow us to lift ourselves up consistently, and that the short-term relief that you might get from abandoning your ideals is just, it's a trap. It doesn't actually work. And you will just consistently then have to lower your ideals more and more and more and more and more to continue feeling good about yourself. And at the end, you just become, you lose all your self-respect. When we are patient and consistent and we keep investing in our highest ideals, which simply means giving some time and energy to worship Krishna, carving as much out of our life as we can and consistently investing in that, our high ideals will slowly grow, become more integrated with them. And that's the real basis of genuine self-respect and dignity and worth and value. And as we slowly move up and develop our consciousness, and then as for the abandonment of material pleasures and pursuits, is also a natural development of this, where while we have it, we use whatever opulences we have in Krishna's service, and slowly with time, a natural sense of detachment comes as these things start to fade away, and we can then let them go peacefully and not be disturbed when they go out, because all our opulences, it's just lent. It's just borrowed to us for a little bit. We just have it for a little bit, and then at a certain point, it will go away again. And that it is in the encounter of our limitations that we cultivate genuine humility, and that that humility should not make us lazy, but it should be combined with proper effort, sincere effort on spiritual life. And then we see that all of us can attain success, just like Maharishi Yati, who was in a way more complicated position than any one of us, had way more opportunities for temptation, and even he attained wonderful success. Okay, so I'll see here. Anything, Jeff, what to do with all your beauty? You should just simply become Instagram famous. you should just post pictures, as much pictures as you can of your beauty on the internet, but intersperse it with quotes of Krishna, some spiritual lifting content. And please tell me where I can follow you on social media, because you are genuinely look very wonderful, and looks like you have a wonderful life there in nature. I'm actually being envious just looking at your feed while class is happening.
I'm envious of Bhima Prabhu too.
Yes.
Bhima Prabhu, we can't hear you. You're muted. Bhima Prabhu, unmute yourself.
Hey.
I was joking. I'm an old man. There's no beauty here, that's for sure. Yes, it is a beautiful life, and ultimately, I want to. We just saw a nice red fox, a beautiful little red fox run across that field in the distance. You know, the one thing is, of course, it's not so much our beauty, it's the beauty. And I know we one time Prabhupada was walking with some disciples, and there was a bit on the western coast, and you probably all heard this, but it begs repeating, and that is, you know, Prabhupada, what a beautiful sunset. And he said, if you think that's beautiful, you should see the creator, or the person who created that sunset. So if beauty that we see in this world is a reflection of Krishna, then we've remembered Krishna. I am the taste of water. I'm the light of the sun. I'm the intelligence of the intelligence. I'm your very life force. If we can just always remember that, then you're constantly seeing God, Krishna everywhere. So, yeah, it's yeah, Hare Krishna.
So just like if you see, is his name Bhima? Name Bhima? If you see how beautiful Bhima is, you can just imagine how beautiful is Bhima's creator. Any other questions or comments from anyone?
Yeah, there's some appreciations in the chat. Preeti says, this was a great talk, Prabhu, Hare Krishna. And Jamuna Jaya says, such a great talk about true humility. Thank you. Thank you, Hare Vilas Prabhu. Great talk. So yeah, I have a quick question. And feel free to, anyone in the audience, feel free to chip in and interrupt me anytime. So you said that Krishna will gently take away everything, so we shouldn't worry about it. And then that gradually our desires will diminish with old age. But there's one story that Prabhupada, I think, told of a king who was brought into a hospice where a man was leaving his body, and the king was asked to bring his daughter with him to illustrate the point how this lust doesn't diminish even on the deathbed. The guy was still checking out his daughter. What do you say to that?
So if you misquoted me a little bit there. So I didn't say at all that desire diminishes with old age. Not at all.
Oh, the ability to enjoy. Yeah.
The ability to enjoy it diminishes. So it is by consistent worship that when the ability goes down, then we are able to let it go. Mm-hmm. For those who do not invest in worshiping Krishna in service, what will happen is with time their opulences will go away, and what will happen is they actually just increase their lust and increase their fear, because they see it, and you see it, and then you see these ladies who are 98 years old, and they're still spending thousands of dollars on plastic surgery doing this because their beauty is being lost. They actually lost it already 20 years ago, but it's too much for them. So same thing, you see these old men, 95 years old, and they, you go sit in a strip club somewhere because they can't give it up. So that's the point also to see Maharishi Yati's life. The point is explain that desire never just goes away with time or by enjoyment, not automatically. It is the worship of Krishna in the midst of whatever else is happening in your life, that when the time comes and time takes it away from you, that you say, yes, please take it. God, finally, the burden. Like I have my mother, when she was at a certain point, she became a devotee, and she's like in her 60s now. And one day she's like, okay, I'm gonna stop dyeing my hair. She's like, I'm done now. I'm an old lady. And she was like, oh my God, finally, so many years, it takes all this time, it takes so money, all this effort. She's like, no, it's just gone. I'm just gray now, and I'm super fine with it. So in this way, what happens is that when we're ready to let it go, then time will take it away. But not that it automatically diminishes by time. No, not at all. That's not at all.
Glad you clarified my confusion. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Any questions, reflections from the audience? Angel, go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, I really appreciate everything that you brought up. But I wanted to ask if you're aware of the emotions and of the fact that you don't want to be an idol or worship like Krishna, and that's the reason as to why you don't want to be on social media, because you understand that clearly. You understand where it can go. It can lead what kind of energy you're feeding. Where you're feeding in reality is the ego, the mode of so why why it's because then we'll be conditioning it, no? Like if it's playing with fire. So how can
sure. So
how can we because obviously the internet is one of the biggest ways to actually get to be able to connect with others. So and you make so many good points, but it's so scary to even consider, like, oh my gosh, what if I do fall in that trap? What if I fall hard and then I get used to that?
Well, we see that, as we said, we explained the 6 opulences, 6 natural opulences: fame, beauty, power, wealth, wisdom, and renunciation or detachment. These are the 6 opulences that Krishna has in full. And all of us in this world, we have some of it. We're endowed with a little bit, something, some more than others. Now, these opulences, when misused, they bind us to material life. And they cause greater and greater complications. And so now the easiest solution is think, oh, maybe I should just give them all away. I should just give all my money away. I should just never assume any position of power. I will never assume any position of power or responsibility. I will just make myself ugly. I will be sure to be insignificant. I will make sure that I have 0 followers. I will make sure no person even knows that I'm alive. I will be so opposite of famous that no one even know that I exist. So that solution is the negative solution, the solution of Gyan. And the path of Bhakti is not like that. The path of Bhakti explains that no, these things are not bad. It is their misuse that are bad. But if we use them, we can use them in Krishna's service, then we become protected from them. So whatever you are, if you have power, power is a wonderful thing. It can be used for great good. When good men, evil happens when good men do nothing. When there are not good men in power, then you will see bad things happen. So similarly, fame, people who are famous. Fame is a wonderful thing. You can use fame to your great advantage. You look, some examples, you look at like Jay Shetty and his wife, or like beautiful and famous, and like really famous. They're like really famous. And like I remember once I was with Radhanath Maharaj and Jay Shetty. They were standing at the Rath Yatra at Washington Square Park. And then like a group of people came and they like came up and they like looked at Jay Shetty and they're like, oh, we're like such great fans. So interesting because there's his spiritual master is there, Radhanath Maharaj, and then Jay Shetty is there, he's arguably more famous than his own spiritual master. But we see that they use it to great advantage. His book that he brought out, his wife, she posts so many wonderful things, very Krishna conscious content she posts on Instagram. So it's all about using our opulences. So if we use our opulences, we become protected, and that's the actual purpose. So whatever it is that we have, we should take it and use it properly. And even in the Bible, we have that story that Jesus tells of how the father gave coins. He gave his coins to his sons. One son just squandered it, one son just buried it, and another son used it and multiplied it. And it's explained that's the same way. So all these opulences Krishnas give us, and we have to use them and increase them and use it for his glorification. And that is how, that is the best use of these things. So therefore, yeah, no need. If you are famous, beautiful, powerful, wealthy, no need to forsake them. Use it properly. And that's then the art and the science. Try to find ways to use them nicely. And devotees do many different things, all kinds of different things that we can do to use it. And that is how we become protected. Okay, so it's 8 o'clock here. I have to also bounce. I thank you very much, everyone, for coming. It's so nice to be with you all. Thank you, Ananda, for inviting me. And see you next time.
Thank you so much for your practical, very nice class. Let's not feel bad about ourselves. Let's keep consistently serving Krishna, and in due course, Krishna will gently help us, become pure devotees in every way. Thank you, Angel. Thanks, Bhima, everyone who contributed to class. See you again tomorrow is another day. Krishna consciousness is every day. We have to surrender. We have to choose Krishna every day, every morning, every minute. Bhima Prabhu, thanks for sharing your beauty, your horses. Hare Krishna.